13 masterpieces, gone in 81 minutes. They have never been found. This is the story of the largest art theft in human history. A crime so brazen, so perfectly executed, and so completely unsolved that it has haunted investigators, art experts, and the city of Boston for 35 years. To understand what was lost that night, you first have to understand what Isabella Stewart Gardner built and why it could never, under any circumstances, be replaced. Isabella Stewart Gardner was a Boston socialite, an heiress, and a woman so far ahead of her time that the city's conservative elite never quite knew what to make of her. In the early 1900s, she opened the doors of her museum on the Fenway, a building she had designed herself to resemble a 15th century Venetian palace, filled floor to ceiling with 2,000 works of art she had personally collected over decades of travel across Europe. Rembrandts, Vermeers, Titians, Raphaels. The collection was extraordinary, not just for its quality, but for its intimacy. Gardner had arranged everything herself, personally deciding where each work would hang. When she died in 1924, her will contained a remarkable and ironclad clause: nothing in the museum could ever be moved, sold, loaned, or changed. The collection had to remain exactly as she had arranged it, forever. If the terms were ever violated, the entire collection would be sold and the proceeds given to Harvard University. So the museum had no choice but to obey. Every brushstroke, every frame, every arrangement locked in place by the hand of a woman who had been dead for decades. By 1990, the collection was valued at an estimated $500 million, and the museum protecting it had a security system that, by any modern standard, was laughably inadequate. There were motion detectors, yes, but they were set up in a way that allowed staff to move through the building at night without triggering an alarm. The guards were instructed never to let anyone in after hours without clearance. That rule was everything. March 17, 1990, St. Patrick's Day in Boston. The city was alive, bars packed, music everywhere, tens of thousands of people celebrating in the streets well into the early hours. Inside the Gardner Museum that night, 2 security guards were on duty. One of them was 23-year-old Rick Abbott, a part-time musician who had worked at the museum for less than a year. Shortly after midnight, Abbott made a decision that would haunt him for the rest of his life. Security footage showed him walking to the museum's side entrance and pressing a button, disabling the lock on the exterior door. Investigators have never been able to prove whether this was intentional or simply a careless habit. Abbott himself has always denied involvement in the theft, but what happened next unfolded with a precision that suggested someone had done their homework. At 1:24 in the morning, a car pulled up to the side entrance of the museum on Palace Road. 2 men got out. They were wearing dark uniforms, police uniforms. They knocked on the door and told Rick Abbott they were responding to a disturbance call. Abbott buzzed them in, a direct violation of museum protocol, which required him to call the police department to verify any officer's identity before granting access. The moment that door opened, the largest art theft in history began. Within seconds, the 2 men told Abbott, "This is a robbery, don't do anything stupid." They handcuffed both guards, wrapped duct tape around their eyes and mouths, and led them to the basement, where they chained each man to a separate pipe, far enough apart that they couldn't help each other. Then, with the entire museum to themselves, the 2 men went to work. They had 81 minutes, and they knew exactly where to go. They went first to the Dutch room on the 2nd floor, a gallery housing some of the most valuable works in the entire collection. And here is where the story becomes almost unbearable for anyone who loves art. They took Rembrandt's Storm on the Sea of Galilee, his only known seascape, painted in 1633, a work of astonishing drama, a boat in violent water, the figures of Christ and his disciples rendered with terrifying immediacy. They did not remove the canvas carefully. They cut it from its frame with a knife, a method that experts say almost certainly damaged the painting. They didn't care. They moved on. From the same room, they took Rembrandt's self-portrait from 1629, one of his earliest known works, and a 3rd Rembrandt, a lady and gentleman in black. 3 Rembrandts in a single room, in a single night. They also took the only Vermeer in the United States outside of a major national collection, the Concert, painted around 1665. Three figures at a harpsichord, soft northern light, one of 34 known Vermeers in existence. 5 Degas works, a Manet, a finial from the top of a Napoleonic flag. In all, 13 objects were taken that night, chosen, investigators believe, with some degree of prior knowledge of what was most valuable. At 2:45 in the morning, the two men walked out of the Gardner Museum carrying the most valuable stolen art in history. They loaded it into a waiting car, and they drove away into the St. Patrick's Day darkness. The guards were found in the basement around 8 in the morning when the day staff arrived. Neither had been physically harmed beyond the restraints. They were shaken, disoriented, and the alarms had never gone off. When police and museum staff reached the Dutch room, they found the empty frames still hanging on the walls, exactly where the paintings had been. The frames had been left behind, too large presumably, or simply not worth the trouble. By that afternoon, the story was everywhere. The Boston Globe, the New York Times, national television. The impossible had happened. Someone had walked into one of America's most celebrated museums and stripped it of its greatest treasures. The FBI took over the investigation almost immediately, and here is where the story pivots, from a crime into something stranger, longer, and more frustrating than almost any case in the Bureau's history. Within months, a $10 million reward was announced, one of the largest ever offered for stolen art. It produced thousands of tips. None of them led anywhere definitive. The early investigation focused heavily on the Boston underworld. The city in 1990 was still very much controlled by organized crime. The Winter Hill Gang and its associates had deep roots in the area, and investigators believed the theft had the hallmarks of a professional, coordinated operation. One persistent theory centers on a Boston mob figure named Robert Guarente, who investigators believe may have been involved in moving or storing the paintings. Guarente died in 2004, taking whatever he knew with him. Another theory involves a Connecticut antiques dealer named William Youngworth III, who claimed in 1997 that he knew where the paintings were and could broker their return for immunity and the release of an imprisoned associate. The FBI declined. The paintings never appeared. In 2013, the FBI announced what it called a significant breakthrough. Investigators said they had identified the two thieves, though they declined to name them publicly, and believed the paintings had been transported to Philadelphia and Connecticut in the years immediately following the theft. Both suspects, they said, were now dead. Once again, the trail went cold before it could reach the paintings themselves. Over the decades, theories have multiplied. Some investigators have pointed to international organized crime networks, the Irish Republican Army, the Corsican Mafia, and various European criminal organizations have all been mentioned in connection with the case at various times, though none definitively. Art crime experts have long noted that stolen masterpieces of this profile are almost impossible to sell openly. They're too famous, too recognizable, which raises an uncomfortable question that investigators have wrestled with for 35 years. Who would steal them and why? Some experts believe the paintings were stolen to order, commissioned by a private collector who wanted them for personal possession, knowing they could never be shown. Others believe they were intended as collateral in criminal dealings, used to back illegal transactions the way a bank uses bonds. There is also a third possibility, one that art crime investigators consider disturbingly plausible. The paintings may have been damaged during the theft, degraded in poor storage conditions over the following decades, or even destroyed. They may no longer exist. Back in Boston, inside the Gardner Museum, Isabella Stewart Gardner's will continues to govern everything, and so the empty frames remain. They hang on the walls exactly as they did on the morning of March 18, 1990, a permanent open wound.